What is going on? Happy January. It's the MMA podcast. No fights this week, but we got a slew of fight announcements, a little bit of MMA news to break down, joined as always by Sweet Pappy Jones. He's known by on Twitter. Pat, what's going on, brother?
Oh, Big Jake, we're just hanging. It is a beautiful January out here in SoCal. Loving it, and can't wait to get into some MMA news with you, my man. Look forward to breaking down what we have on this rather slow week of MMA.
Yeah, we don't have anything right around the corner. In about a week and a half next week, we'll be previewing that inaugural ESPN card. We got the main card on ESPN Plus, the prelims, including a real fun scrap between Alexander Hernandez and Donald Cerrone on ESPN. Obviously, that whole card headlined by TJ Dillashaw and Henry Cejudo. That'll be a fun one. We'll be talking about next week. But this week, the UFC had the week off, and in that week they did a lot of work, at least as far as signing fights for the future. I'm going to start off with Tyron Woodley and Kamaru Usman at UFC 235. That's the same card as John Jones and Lionheart Smith that we'll talk about next, and a few other real fun fights, including, I think, Robbie Lawler versus Ben Askren. That's going to be a great card. But the main question people were asking about this Tyron Woodley-Kamaru Usman matchup was where exactly Colby Covington fit into all of this. Woodley and Covington have had a lot of back and forth. Covington, I'm not sure if he is or was the UFC interim welterweight champion, but he was given that strap after defeating Rafael Dos Anjos in his last fight. He and Woodley were supposed to fight two other times. Each of them had to cancel making plans because they were injured. I don't know if they're trying to punish Colby for being injured. I have a feeling there's something behind the scenes going on because all of a sudden Colby goes from being buddy-buddy with Dana, going as far as to make a appointment with him and Trump in the Oval Office. It goes from Dana's boy to now he's I think the last I heard he was trash talking White and saying that if he had any balls he would release him. Obviously very upset not getting the title shot here. And Pat, the thing I want to talk to you about is this doesn't make normally there's something we can point to. Oh, this guy is going to make the UFC more cash, or the fans want this guy, or this guy has the interim belt. As far as here, we know that Woodley is the champ, but when you look at between Covington and Usman, every single direction points toward Colby. The fans want to see it. The bad blood is there. You're going to make more money. Both men have fought the same two opponents in their last two fights and had the same exact result. I wouldn't say Kamaru Usman definitively beat either one of them better than Colby did. It's just not that this fight isn't going to be great. It just made so much more sense. Pardon me, to have Woodley fight Colby and then fight Usman. Just this matchup between Usman and Woodley, and we aren't the only ones saying this. Everyone is asking, what's going on? Why has the UFC once again, they did it with Till last September, once again seemed to skip over Colby Covington?
It really is a great question, Jake. And as you mentioned, comparing Kamaru Usman's record to Colby Covington's record, a lot of similarities. Covington is on a 6-fight win streak. Kamaru Usman, I believe, is on a 9-fight UFC win streak. Nice. And a greater win streak overall. But as far as any other factors, I think the level of activity, Kamaru Usman had 3 fights in 2018. Colby Covington only had the one. But some would say that's just because that one fight that Colby Covington had was for the interim title fight. So after that, there should only logically be one other fight he should be getting signed up for, and that would be a title fight. And whether or not that happened because of his injury or Tyron Woodley's injury or what the situation was with this particular booking or this particular situation. It's kind of interesting that Colby Covington ends up getting leapfrogged by Usman when seemingly Covington was just sitting and waiting because he won the interim championship. That should be his next fight. So even the whole level of activity argument, you could argue that either way for either fighter. So I have seen some people posit that they believe that the UFC just doesn't like Tyron Woodley as a champ and that they think Kamaru Usman has a better shot at beating him. And so that's why Kamaru is going to get the shot over Colby Covington. But why put Covington in the shot for the interim championship and all that good stuff in the first place? If that's the way the UFC's brass is thinking, has their thought, I mean, is this a new development where just in 2018 they said, oh, you know what, maybe Kamaru's better? Because really they've both been kind of showing the same level of stuff over the last couple of years as far as Woodley and Usman are concerned. I feel like, they've kind of still been displaying the same level of talent. So I don't know that it's become, and Jake especially, as you mentioned, their last two fights against the same opponents, both similar decision victories. There hasn't really been anything super standout one way or the other that would make you think, oh, this guy's going to have a big edge against Woodley, at least just based on their last couple performances. So, yeah, interesting move, but I think, there definitely does seem to be a bit of perceived beef between Tyron and some of the UFC brass. So if they think Usman is the real deal, and maybe they like his level of activity too, because he is fighting fairly frequently, and that is something they would like from a champion. Just, of course, we all know they love that from their fighters overall, so that's certainly got a factor in this as well.
We'll obviously save our official pick for UFC 235 week, but if I'm asking which way you're leaning, P-Money, who you got?
Well, early, I'd have to say I'm leaning Woodley. I mean,
I am too.
he's a seasoned vet in this game, and Usman has been looking really good. He's certainly been on a tear, but early, I'm thinking Woodley retains.
Yep, if I had to pick either way, I would say and still. I have heard that idea float around as well. It's no secret that Dana White and Tyron Woodley aren't exactly on the best terms. I mean, they've gone as far as to air out beef against one another on TMZ. But to schedule Kamaru Usman versus Tyron Woodley is putting that title fight between Colby Covington and Woodley at risk. And if Woodley loses the belt, it makes that fight extremely less sought after. A lot of fans want to see Colby and Tyron fight for the belt. And if Usman does beat Woodley and that fight never materializes, the people who are going to lose money are the UFC. So you're essentially just shooting yourself in the foot by putting that title fight in jeopardy. Moving right along, like I mentioned, on that same card, we're going to see John Jones defend his light heavyweight championship for the first time, or I guess the 10th time, depending how you want to look at it. Or no? I think he had eight the first time. So if you count his first run, his 9th title defense, but his first one as far as this title run goes after defeating Gustafsson and getting the vacated belt from DC. He's going to be fighting Anthony Smith at UFC 235. A little bit of bad blood. I don't know if you watched UFC 232, but there was a lot of fun back and forth between both guys on the post-fight desk. There's been a little rumblings. I do credit Jones for not only being active, but not necessarily, hanging around for the cash fight. You know that Brock is out there somewhere, and you've seen a lot of champions kind of holding the strap and waiting around. Jones looks hungry. I think Anthony Smith. You know, there are a few other guys. I know you were talking about Corey Anderson an episode ago. I don't think there's that much of a problem. I think he's as far as him being named the number one contender at 205. And man, you know, of course, everyone's going to be leaning John Jones here. I won't even make that its own topic because I think he opened at minus 1,300. But Anthony Smith, you know, he does get that knock against him that he's lost. I think like 13 times. You know, he is as much a MMA veteran as John Jones is, but he really has been putting it together recently. He's like dynamite at 205. Everyone's saying Jones is going to finish the fight early. It's like, I don't know. I think this will be a more interesting fight than a lot of folks think. But what was your first reaction here that John Jones, already less than a couple weeks after beating Alex Gustafsson, paired up against Anthony Smith here at UFC 235, which is going to be a spectacular card, like I mentioned, a ton of fun fights.
Yeah, they're definitely booking this card very nicely. And I was pretty surprised to see such a quick turnaround. John Jones getting right back into the mix. And it's definitely what I love to see from any fighter, especially a champion. If there's a possibility for multiple defenses, maybe even 3 defenses in a year, or 3 title fights from the same champion in a year, that's a great year. Usually, even if you get 2 defenses from a champion in a calendar year, that's pretty lucky for a promotion and the fans if they can maintain that level of activity. 3 though, oh, that's rather ideal. I enjoy that very much. So good to see. And I was a little bit surprised that they put Anthony Smith in there, but I thought Corey Anderson would get the spot in that. But yeah, perhaps they were waiting to see what happens with this fight with Ilir Latifi. I want to say, what was that, the last UFC card that we had here? And they just decided to put the gears in motion for the Anthony Smith fight. I do believe that John Jones will probably run through Anthony Smith. He's definitely regarded as kind of a journeyman, Jake, as you noted. He's definitely come on strong in his last few fights. Looked good, some good finishes. But taking on John Jones, that is certainly a whole nother beast. We've seen what he's done to some of the greats. And Anthony Smith, he seems like a classy character for a mixed martial artist. And I've enjoyed his work as of late. But, man, he's really got a gigantic test in front of him. I don't even feel like minus 1,300 is super disrespectful, just because that's where John Jones is at pretty much compared to everybody else. I don't think we'll be seeing odds anything different when he goes to take on almost any other opponent, except for maybe when he moves up to heavyweight, or if he moves up to heavyweight, or if he ends up getting some big prospect down the line. But I think we're going to see Jones as a huge favorite going forward and throughout the rest of his career, unless somebody beats him. But yeah, love seeing that quick rate of activity.
Yeah, March 2nd. That'll be a real fun card in Las Vegas. Like I said, Lawler Askren. You got Jeremy Stevens taking on Zabit Magomed Shapirov. Holly Holm and Aspen Ladd. OSP, Misha Sirkunov. Another fight we'll get to later this episode, actually. Cody Garbrandt against Pedro Munoz. Thomas Almeida, Marlon Vera. Very, very fun card to lead off March. Another title fight made in the last week that a lot of folks are talking about. Rose Namajunas. Hadn't heard from her in a little while, but she will defend her strawweight title against the person everyone wanted to see her defend it against, Jessica Andrade. The notable thing here, she's going to be in enemy territory. This will be a UFC 237 on May 11th in Brazil. You rarely see champions from outside Brazil go to Brazil to defend their championship, especially if it's against a Brazilian, because those fans are wild. They are ultra nationalistic for their fighters, and they will for sure be coming out to root for Jessica Andrade here. Man, this is an interesting move. You know, I I think Rose has been getting a lot of flack for, she wasn't taking a fight for a while. She had cited some sort of PTSD issues surrounding that bus attack that she was a part of when Connor threw that dolly through the bus. And I think this is her kind of sending a middle finger to all of the fans who are talking shit about her, saying, if you really think I'm that weak, I'm gonna go to the toughest place to defend your belt, and I'm gonna face the number one contender. I think everyone agrees that Jessica Andrade is the fight to make, yeah, it'll be interesting. I think the only time recently I can think of this happening was Ronda Rousey and Bitch Kohea, and even then, Rousey was such a star that the fans were cheering her on there. So interested to see the kind of reception Rose will get. I'm sure it won't be that bad. She's not going to march into Rio like Chael Sonnen or Colby Covington, talking shit about everyone who lives there. I'm sure, as she always is, will be very respectful to her opponent and her opponent's country. But yeah, May 11th, it'll be interesting. I think I'm leaning Doug Rose. She just looked so great dispatching Yin Jacek in both of those fights. Hard not to think that train will keep going. Although Andrade, a different kind of striker, where Joanna was more of a she wouldn't ever knock anyone out with one strike. She would be more of a volume type knockout, where you fade in the third or fourth round just because you've been getting pounded on all night. Where Jessica Andrade is the type of fighter who can finish it with one strike. So yeah, May 11th, Brazil. Pat, what are you thinking about this one?
I'm thinking this is going to be a fantastic matchup. Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas. Both of these ladies are 6-1 in their last 7 bouts. Rose, her only loss coming in those 7 fights to Karolina Kowalkiewicz via split decision, who Jessica Andrade knocked out in the first round in her last fight. Jessica Andrade, her only loss in the last 7 fights comes to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who Rose actually just beat twice. First time TKOing and then decisioning. So both of these ladies have beat an opponent that's their current opponent, or the person they're going to be fighting, has lost to. So interesting little bit of MMA math going to be going on here. Definitely a styles make fight situation. Both of these ladies have great skills everywhere, though. This is going to be a super, super fun match, both striking and on the ground. Jessica Andrade is a super powerful 115. She used to compete up at 135 pounds, made the cut down to 115, and has just been looking like a beast since. Super powerful with the strikes, with the takedowns. She's got some great ground game. Claudia Gadelha, she absolutely manhandled in a 3-round fight. Definitely solidified her position at the top of the women's 115-pound division. And Rose, she's got great length for 115 pounds. She's shown she's got great striking. She's got power, and she's very creative. She's got some good submissions as well. So she's a threat anywhere this fight goes. Definitely big props to her going into Brazil. Hostile territory, especially as far as that fight game is concerned. And defending her title against such a beast at 150 pounds like Jessica Andrade. Definitely big props to Rose. Going to be a tough fight for both these ladies, I'm sure. I feel like I have to pick Rose in this one. The way she beat up Joanna in the last 2 fights, I think she's really onto something. But Jessica Andrade, man, I'm not sleeping on her. I'm not really sleeping on her at all. She is very tough, and I mean, styles make fights. I wouldn't be surprised if Jessica got it done in Brazil, but uh, I'll probably have to review that one as we get a little closer to it. Kind of a coin flip for me right now.
Yeah, I'm leaning Thug Rose, but I'm not leaning very hard in either direction because you are right. Jessica Andrade is a very live contender there. Going from women's 115 all the way to the other side of the spectrum, men's 265. You want to talk about some knockout artists? Junior Dos Santos versus Derek Lewis, coming from Steven Morocco from MMA Junkie for UFC on ESPN Plus 4. That, I guess, event will be taking place March 9th in Wichita, Kansas. Um, a couple of big hitters there. I man, I I feel like I'm leaning Dos Santos just because he has had this resurgence lately, and I have this feeling in the pit of my gut that once DC hangs his gloves up, that Kane and JDS kind of poetically will both be rising to title contendership around the same time, and we might see that fight one more time. Even though it drives me absolutely insane that during the prime of Kane's career, from age 27 to 32, the UFC only scheduled him against two different guys in 5 fights. He over 5 fights fought Junior Dos Santos 3 times and Bigfoot Silva twice, which it made sense weirdly because aside from Kane, both of those guys were winning all of their other fights. But that was just a very, very strange era for the heavyweight division. But yeah, getting back to this fight, Derek Lewis and Junior Dos Santos. Lewis obviously coming off a title shot loss to Daniel Cormier, but before that was on a nice little 3-fight win streak against Marcin Tybura, Francis Ngannou, and Alexander Volkov. Junior Dos Santos himself losing to Stipe Miocic for the belt and is on a 2-fight win streak. A lot of folks thought that Tai Tuivasa, the young gun, was going to throw JDS in the scrap heap, but Junior connected with those second round punches to score a TKO, and the guy looked just as fresh. I think he needed some time off after those Kane fights. I think that they really did a number on him. But the guy has looked good in 2018. Was one of the fighters I was thinking about for comeback of 2018. But yeah, I think I'm leaning Junior in this one. Although this is obviously one of those fights where whoever lands the first big shot is probably going to win it.
I mean, that's for sure. You could probably say that about most of the heavyweight fights, but with this one, I'm pretty excited. I mean, Junior Dos Santos and Derek Lewis, two of the biggest favorites in the UFC heavyweight division for sure. Both very well liked for their personalities as much as their styles. Both have great striking. And I think that's probably what we're going to see. Just a good old fashioned boxing match with those small UFC gloves, and should make for a fun battle. I think for me, though, this is Junior's fight to win, really. He should have the technical advantage, and I think he hits probably just about as hard as Derek Lewis, really. Junior Dos Santos, he has provided some fantastic highlight reel knockouts over the years. And he's been doing it for such a long time now. I mean, he's probably reached at least 10 years in the UFC as we speak. And he's been knocking fools senseless ever since he burst on the scene and KO'd Fabricio Verdum. Yeah, over 10 years ago. That was in October of 2008 when he made his debut. We're in 2019, people. This is Junior's 11th year in the UFC. And since then, he's only ever lost to the very best. Stipe Miocic, the heavyweight who defended the belt more than any other heavyweight ever has. Alistair Overeem, who we all know his credentials, and Cain Velasquez. another one of the very best UFC heavyweights we've ever seen. So those are his only defeats in the UFC, and he has still shown that he's got it. He's still just as sharp, still just as powerful, Jake, as he would refer to, with him TKO and tied to Ivasa in the second round. Very good looking young up and comer. Junior Dos Santos was able to starch him fairly handily in Tai Tuivasa's home neighborhood over there in Australia. So this one will be a banger over in Wichita, and of course Derek Lewis, though, definitely can't sleep on him. Only having lost to Mark Hunt and Daniel Cormier in his last 10 plus fights, something like that. He's been beating everybody that's been put in front of him too. Sometimes not as convincingly as Junior, of course. Alexander Volkov, he was having the life beaten out of him, but he was able to just rally with an absolute miracle of a KO. The power is always, as long as he's on his feet, the power is still with Derek Lewis. So he's certainly got a shot. And we did see Stipe TKO Junior in their rematch. So it's not unprecedented that Junior has been TKO'd. And I mean, Derek Lewis, he's got just as good a chance to knock out anybody. This man could knock out Knox, old Derek Lewis. But ooh, technicality wise, I feel like this should favor Junior, but yeah, definitely can't sleep on either guy. But money's on you, Junior, early in this one.
Bumping down to welterweight, Anthony Pettis, it looks like is going to be moving up from 55 to 70, just as he's getting older, similarly to what Mike Chiesa did, going up from lightweight to welterweight. And Pettis calls out Stephen Wonderboy Thompson for his first fight at 170, which I like the fight. It sounds like a lot of fun. Currently, Pettis, I think, 8th at lightweight. Stephen Thompson, number 4 at welterweight, kind of rounding out those top 5 guys between, you have obviously that love triangle between Woodley, Covington, and Usman. After that, the 2 most recent losers in title fights, Darren Till and Stephen Thompson. Stephen Thompson, one of the best at that division, just kind of a tough style matchup against Woodley, who has game planned perfectly, seemingly for Thompson both times. I think that I would not be shocked at all seeing Thompson being able to grab a win against Colby or Marty from Nebraska, as Ben's been calling Usman. It's an interesting spot that Stephen Thompson's in, even more for Anthony Pettis, because as much as a fan as I want to see this, I don't know if I'd be making that same call out. Pettis might think that's a very good style matchup for him, but that might be a tough fight. I might want to start my welterweight career out with a W instead of jumping straight in. But I've got to respect him shooting up, going for a guy who is definitely in the title picture, especially if Woodley loses the belt. Think I would lean Wonder Boy in a potential fight between the two, but it'll be interesting. A lot of fun fights. We could see Pettis take on Cerrone again. Pettis take on the other cowboy, Alex Oliveira. Him versus Neil Magny would be a fun fight. I'm looking forward to seeing him. I think his foray at 170 will likely be much, much more successful to when he was trying to cut down to 145 and was damn near killing himself.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been seeing more and more what a lot of these weight cuts can do to fighters, depleting them. And hopefully Pettis does look just as good moving up to 170 pounds as, say, Michael Chiesa did in his most recent welterweight debut. Or, hey, look at old Bobby Knuckles. He was at 170 pounds, got knocked out by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, goes up to 185 pounds, is looking fantastic, beating everybody, won the championship. So it seems to be a fairly positive trend that's been gaining a little bit of traction as of late. And hopefully, there's of course been talks with 165 pounds, and if they were to make that division, they could kind of reshuffle things a little bit. That would at least hopefully make it easier for a lot of fighters to get into their more natural weight classes and have that as an option as opposed to these these extreme weight cutting situations. I think a lot of fighters are going to choose that, especially as they see, fighters continuing to perform well at their maybe more natural weight class. And yeah, and even going back to the women too, now we have a 125-pound division where, someone like Jessica Andrade, who knows, maybe she would have just started cutting to 125 pounds as 115, back when the UFC only had 135 and 115 as options for female mixed martial artists. So, um, anyways, that whole jaunt aside, Anthony Pettis going up to 170, definitely not a bad choice. And yeah, him versus Wonderboy Thompson, great style matchup. I love that. Um, I wonder what the size difference would be like them standing right next to each other. I believe Pettis is listed at 5'10", and Stephen Thompson right about the same, if I recall. That's 6 foot tall, so um, at least height wise, not a giant discrepancy there. But um, yeah, both very similar styles. I would probably have to favor Pettis on the ground there. We've seen him submit some very skilled fighters. Uh, so I would definitely have to say he's got the edge there. But man, what a striking battle that would be. That'd be an excellent one. Um, I say book it.
A fight I hinted at that we would break down. It's going down on that big UFC 235 card. We're getting back to it now. Cody Garbrandt and Pedro Munoz added to that card. Man, this is a big step up for Munoz, who definitely showed his worth. He was on a big 4-fight win streak before losing to John Dodson via a very close split decision at UFC 222. Getting right back on the horse, defeating Brett Johns, and even more impressively, Brian Caraway, just a couple months at that tough heavy hitters finale. Gotta love anyone who knocks out Brian Caraway in the first round. And man, I would say I would pick Pedro Munoz to beat almost anyone else in that division other than those top guys. I mean, he's only ninth, but I see, the fight against Sterling. I think that's a very winnable fight for him. The same thing goes for fights against John Lineker, Jimmy Rivera, Marlon Moraes. I mean, the guy has shown a ton of talent at bantamweight, but I don't know. I think Cody Garbrandt belongs in that top 2 or 3 conversation. I think he those two fights he had against or that one fight he had against Cruz, just that was not a fluke. He dominated one of the best fighters of all times of all time for 5 rounds. And even though he did he did catch a KO twice against T.J. Dillashaw, I think that's a historic talent we're seeing right now at the top of 135 in TJ, who is going down to, I think, become the lightest, try at least to become the lightest double champ just next week when he fights Henry Cejudo. But yeah, there are a lot of interesting fights to be made. This is one, and I wouldn't count Munoz out of it. But man, Cody has, yeah, he has looked susceptible to T.J. Dillashaw, but that's really the only guy we've seen who has took a chink out of his armor. So I'm leaning Garbrandt, I think, in this one. But it's a great opportunity for Munoz, and especially if he can at least challenge him and make it a close fight, then he will be able to argue for more big fights against top 5 talent at 135.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely a tough fight. Pedro Munoz has really only lost to top talent himself. His uh, first loss to Rafael Assunção was his UFC debut. Um, Very tough UFC debut to be making. Had a split decision against John Dodson and a split decision against Jimmy Rivera. Certainly no certainly no shame in either of those, especially, I mean, going to the split. And he's got victories over some very tough opponents. Submitted Rob Font, submitted Justin Scoggins, beat the pikey Brett Johns, and Jake, as you mentioned, TKO'd Brian Caraway in the first round. That's a big statement right there. As much as I dislike Caraway, he is a very tough out at 135 pounds. Pedro Munoz is definitely the real deal. Definitely very solid everywhere it goes, and has only ever lost at the top. But man, I think that's right where Cody Garbrandt is at. He has literally destroyed just about everybody not named TJ Dillashaw. I mean, Takeo Mizugaki, Thomas Almeida, Augusto Mendes, Marcus Brimage, TKO, and everybody. And he was doing it with some very heavy hands. Thomas Almeida, I mean, another 135-pound prospect that's still got a bright future ahead of him. And Cody Garbrandt shut him down like nobody's business. Dominic Cruz, one of the best of all time. He had an undisputable win against Dominic Cruz. Very, very decisive to take the UFC Bantamweight Championship away from one of the greats in Dominic. And TJ Dillashaw, man, he's definitely shown that he's got the better of Cody Garbrandt and has finished him twice, but there's really no one else in the 135-pound division that fights the way TJ fights, except for Dominic. And Cody already beat him handily. And, pretty much everybody, I mean, we've seen him take out, strikers of all different kinds. And Mizugaki, who's more of a boxer. Almeida, who's got the crazy kickboxing, very dynamic style. Wrestlers, and Marcus Brimage. He's defeated people with all different kinds of backgrounds and skill sets. I don't think this will be anything particularly new that Cody hasn't seen. And I think I got him taking this one early. But, I mean, Pedro's certainly tough, though. Not, credit where credit is due.
And moving down the line, only two more fights to go. A top 10 contenders match at women's strawweight, pitting Michelle Waterson, who right now I think is on a 2-fight win streak. Yeah, after losing to Thug Rose and Tisha Torres, getting a split decision victory over Courtney Casey, and a pretty one-sided unanimous victory over Felice Herrig back last October. She'll be taking on Carolina Kowalkiewicz, who herself was on a 2-fight winning streak, most recently getting a decision against Felice Herrig before losing via first-round KO to Jessica Andrade, a KO that put Andrade in position to take on Thug Rose, a fight that, had Carolina won, probably would have vaulted her into a title shot against Thug Rose. We know how she does have a win against the champion on her record, a split decision win against Rose back at UFC 201. A very important card to have in her back pocket, a win against the champion. I think this is a fight that Carolina will be able to keep standing up. And even though Watterson has that background in karate, we've seen a lot of very impressive stand-up work coming out of the Polish Kowalkiewicz, the former KSW flyweight champ. So I think even though she is coming off that pretty brutal first-round KO back in Dallas, I think I'm taking Carolina to get back on the horse and win this one. Who you got, P-Money?
Ooh, tough one for me to call, Jake, really, as I look at this one. I like Watterson. Definitely, she's got the positive momentum in her side, having beaten Felice Herrig and Courtney Casey. A couple very tough women. But, man, Carolina Kowalkiewicz, in spite of her last fight, I mean, Jessica Andrade, she is a beast, losing to her in such a fashion. Again, I can't really fault her for that. Most ladies, I wouldn't be surprised if they lost to Jessica Andrade in a similar fashion. She's just been on an absolute tear at 115. But Carolina, man, she definitely has a unique or a fairly unique skill set anyways for the division. A very technical striker. And, her only losses are to the top of the division, Joanna, Claudia Gadelia, and Jessica Andrade. And she's beat some tough names herself in Felice Herrig. Has a win over the current champion, Jake, as you mentioned, in Rose Namajunas. Miranda Marcos, always a tough, very tough fighter. Um, Got the unanimous decision way back in 2015 over her. So she's beaten some very tough competition herself. Um, and I think I like her just a little bit over Watterson. I think the size difference is going to be a bit much. The karate hottie and Carolina, although they're both listed at 5'3", I don't know. I think for whatever reason, I feel like Carolina may have the slight edge in the size there. But yeah, I like her skill set as well. But um, man, women's strawweight has just been a super fun division ever since its inception. At least in my opinion, I think this will be another very fun fight to go along with it. But I think early I'm leaning towards Carolina as well.
Women's strawweight does have a lot of talent, but if I could pick any division in the UFC that is just overloaded with talent and doesn't necessarily get that much talked about it, I think I'm going with 135. You have so many beasts at 135, and that's where our last fight announcement takes place. Peter Yan coming off a big TKO against Douglas Silva de Andrade at UFC 233. Going to be taking on John Dodson. That fight will be at UFC Fight Night 145, February 23rd of this year. John Dodson, man, talk about a tough strength of schedule. Just the guys he has fought. He beat pretty much everyone at flyweight except for the one of the best of all time in Demetrius Johnson. Goes up to 135 and has just been thrown a gauntlet of tough fights. His last 3 fights, a split decision loss against Marlon Moraes, a split decision win against Pedro Munoz, and a unanimous decision loss against Jimmy Rivera. Moraes, Munoz, and Rivera are all top 5 talent at 135, and that's in a division where you have a historic champ in Dillashaw, a killer in Garbrandt. I mean, just tons of fighters. I think right now John Dodson is ranked 8th at 135. Peter Yan making his entrance into the rankings, getting put at 14th after his recent win at UFC 232. And I'm a big fan of John Dodson. He always comes not just with a with an attitude where he's ready to throw down, but always very respectful. Seems like a super nice guy. But man, he is just getting tough fight after tough fight. And Peter Yan, I think this kid is going to impress a lot of people in 2019. He's got a lot of hype behind him, and I think it's for good reason. So I'm going with the Russian, Peter Yan, for my final pick of the night. Pat, Dodson, Yan, who you got?
Oh, Jake, I love this fight. I saw this, and I couldn't believe it. They got Yan back in the mix already. We were just talking about him on the last podcast. Made his debut just in June of 2018. Already has 3 victories in the UFC and getting ready to get back in the cage pretty soon here. Where did the date go on that Prague card? Well, yes, coming up very shortly here, February 23rd at the O2 Arena. Man, going to be a good scrap there. I mean, both of these guys really good hands, good wrestling. These Russian cats, though, gee whiz, they seem to be turning them out. I don't know where they're coming from, but lots of strong prospects for coming out of Russia these days. And Peter Yan, he has really shown a lot of promise at 135 pounds. But John Dodson, one of the quickest at 135, and he's still got some power. Definitely going to be undersized, though, coming in at 5'2" compared to 5'7" and a half for Peter Yan. Peter Yan is a big bantamweight. That may be the difference here. And I mean, speed kills, and Dodson, he's got power, he's got speed, but man, this Yan, he's looking pretty tough these days. Um, I don't know. I'm gonna have to give my official decision as we get closer. Ooh, I think I'm leaning Yan though initially.
Yeah, he although he's a little bit further down the rankings, obviously less experienced, I assume will be the betting favorite in Vegas. And that does it. We'll be back next week, depending on how much news there is. If we have some new stuff pop up, we got some stuff to talk about. We'll do 2 shows next week. If not, we will at least do one previewing that big UFC on ESPN Plus card. Henry Cejudo and TJ Dillashaw. Cejudo looking for his first title defense after knocking off one of the greatest of all time. TJ Dillashaw looking to be the lightest champ of all time. So it should be a lot of fun there. And of course, it's a historic card. The UFC making their debut on ESPN, making that big move from Fox Sports to ESPN. Definitely have a lot of curious eyes watching, seeing how the broadcast plays out and all that. So far, I've been really impressed with ESPN. I would not to be a shill or anything. I don't make any percentage off ESPN Plus subscriptions. As goddamn amazing as that would be to pay off my student loans in time, but no, I have enjoyed. They've got a pretty big selection of fights, along with, I believe, a couple podcasts. They have Ariel's show that has now moved over to ESPN, along with a weekly show with Ariel and Chael Sonnen. So, yeah, a big weekend coming up for the UFC that we'll be breaking down. So we will for sure at least be back for that. Pat, anything for the people before we let them go?
Oh, Jake, you know what it is. The people know what it is. Nothing but love for the people. Nothing but love for all the listeners, the subscribers. Jake, nothing but love for you, Pana. It's always a pleasure. Always love talking about those fights with you. Can't wait till we get some more action coming our way.
Love you too, buddy. I love you, the listener. And yeah, we will be back soon. Until then, take care of yourself. Keep your nose to the grindstone. We love the shit out of you. We gone.